In this episode, I'll be showing you how I create my Windows Server base images that allows me to quickly deploy Windows Server VMs. To get started, I'm going to create a new virtual machine, and in this case, I'm going to call mine Windows Server 2022, and I'll be using the standard edition. I don't need anything out of Data Center, and DE for desktop experience, and x64. Perfect. And then I usually like to date code mine, so 09/29/24. That way I know when the image was created. Gen 2 will be fine. I'm going to give mine 4 gig of RAM. I'll connect it to the LAN network that we created in the last episode. And I'm going to expand mine to 256 gigabytes. These are dynamic disks, so it won't actually attempt to allocate that entire space at this point in time. And for ISO, I'm just going to select my Windows Server 2022 image. Now, at this point, depending on what the purpose is, for building your lab, you may wish to choose to use the evaluation version of Windows Server, which is licensed for 180 days from the day it's installed. The reason that I'm using this version is because I have an MSDN subscription, and so I can request keys for development and testing purposes that will permanently activate this install. So you'll have to look at your environment and decide how long you need your test lab to be in effect. For me, this lab may carry on for another year or two, so I would rather just use the MSDN media. With that finished, we can go to settings. We are going to enable TPM and secure boot. I'm going to go ahead and give mine 4 cores just to kind of speed along the installation process. I'm going to disable time synchronization but allow guest services, uncheck the use automatic checkpoints box, do not start the VM on startup, and other than that, we are good to go there. We'll connect and start the VM. We will need to press a key in order to get into setup. Doesn't matter which one. And with that, we're in the server setup. We'll click next and install now. Okay, I'm not going to enter a product key at this point. I don't want to activate this particular installation, and we will be able to complete our tasks without activation. I'm just going to select the standard desktop experience and hit next. And I will select my 256 gigabyte virtual hard disk. The Windows install process is completely automated up until we get to the screen asking for our password. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here and allow Windows to complete its installation. I'll be back with you in just a few minutes. Alrighty. Now, at this point, instead of entering a password, we're going to place the system into sysprep mode. And the way we're going to do this is by pressing Control, Shift, and F3 on the keyboard. The system will then automatically reboot and take us to the administrator account, which will be pre-logged in for us. As you can see, we're now logged in. Doesn't really matter what we press there because it's going to ask us again once the system is set up. Alrighty, so we can dismiss the OOBE and double check here. We should be connected to the internet. Oopsies, put an extra period there. However, I think there might be an error in DNS. That's perfectly fine. What we'll do to get around that for now is we are just going to set ourselves to that DNS server. We will remove that entry later, but just to make sure that we can get out to the internet. Okay, with that out of the way, we're going to want to load some stuff and remove some stuff actually using Server Manager. Now, at this point, this kind of depends on what your plans are, but since I primarily support on-prem infrastructure, things like Azure Arc and other stuff like that kind of just aren't necessary for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by removing Azure Arc from the system. Hit yes, and remove. At this point, it'll automatically reboot once it's complete, and I'll come back once that has happened. All right, we are booted back up. Now, this again depends on what you're doing and what your philosophies are behind doing Windows Server installs. For me, I no longer believe in Microsoft Edge. I really don't believe in it at all, but it wasn't as bad as it used to be. Now it has gotten to a point where I feel like it is a genuine security risk on server installs, even in labs. And to demonstrate that, I'm just going to open Edge and kind of show you why. So one, it's costing you time because every single time it does this, there's no reason for it to be doing this on Windows Server. Zero reason. Just open it up, that's fine. Now, you can select focused here, but just to show you why I think this is such a bad deal, because most people just click OK. So now once we've gone through setup, we have all this junk, okay? Like, and not all of these are like, there's an ad right there, right? Like, this to me is just asking for somebody to click on something, right? What if one of these is one of those fake download programs or something? So for me, Edge is simply a security risk I cannot tolerate. It is. It's just, it's a security risk I cannot tolerate on a server side install. So you can actually remove Windows or Edge from Windows Server 2022. And the way you do it is by going to this key, and we may have to manually enter it, but it looks like it actually came out okay. And then you select change no remove to 0. And under Edge Update, we're also going to change that to 0. We can close out of the registry editor, go to Control Panel, and uninstall Edge. And it will actually uninstall, even if it's the latest version. It will completely uninstall itself. Okay. Now, again, it depends on if you want IE. I don't want IE either, so I'll be covering how to uninstall that in a minute. But first, since we're going to have to reboot now again, you'll see Edge is completely gone from the start menu. Oopsies. We'll let that finish. But again, that's just a philosophy thing, a practices thing, how you want to do it. But for me, every little thing you can do to keep your server safe, you never know when somebody might try to log into one of these things. In a perfect world, you've got it set up so that your users cannot log on to domain controllers and servers and stuff, but who knows? So I always like to keep it as safe as possible. Now, we are going to add a feature because, at least for me, it comes up a lot and it's not built into Windows Server anymore. And that is the .NET Framework. Now, if you click Next, sometimes it'll install it, sometimes it won't. I find that that's very buggy. For me, I just like to specify the side-by-side store as it requests here and allow it to install .NET Framework from the CD drive. That way, it gets .NET Framework installed, and I don't have to worry about an application going looking for .NET Framework 3 later. I'll pause the video and come back when that's complete. Perfect. .NET has succeeded on its install. Now, to remove IE, we're going to open up an administrative PowerShell and maybe type that in, or maybe I'll have to put it in myself. Oh, you know what? I don't know if I gave PowerShell. Nope, I did give it enough time. Okay, try one more time there. Nope, that's all right. I can type it myself. It's not that difficult of a command. Dism/online. If I can spell today, and then we use the disable feature. Feature name. Can I spell today? Should be good to go there now. It'll automatically pull IE out of the operating system. Again, this is completely up to you whether you feel the need for this to be done. I always do it just to keep my servers safe. Personally, I actually prefer running server core, but obviously server core sometimes can be harder to administer, and then you have to have a client somewhere running RSAT, so it's up to you how you want to proceed with that. Totally optional, just depends on what you want to do. Now, at this point, we can run Windows Update. And we're going to run Windows Update. We're going to change a couple settings here. We will allow this. I don't know if it's going to classify our connection as metered or not. Again, something that probably shouldn't exist in Server 22, but it does. This one I always leave off, and this one I always leave off. Okay, and now it's going to go through and proceed with checking for updates. So once again, I'm going to pause here. You may also wish to disable delivery optimization, but in my general experience, this does not get turned on servers. There we go. Now it found its cumulative update and all this stuff. So I'll let this install. This process, especially these cumulative updates now, they take a really long time sometimes. So I'll let this go and I'll come back to you when it's completed. Alrighty, as you can see, it has successfully completed those updates. We've got the cumulative update, the latest security update, and the latest version of the malicious software removal tool. Alright, now I like to install a couple of applications, but you might be wondering, how are you going to get applications installed on this system? You took away your web browser. Well, that's actually a pretty easy problem to solve. We do have to make one correction here. Our date and time is wrong, and that might cause these to fail. So just make sure we get all synced up there. Perfect. Okay. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to use a program called ImageBurn. I'll leave a link down in the description. I'm going to say create image from files and folders. I'm going to give it a label. I just set mine to UDF when I'm doing this. You could do it another way. And in my downloads, I have downloaded the 7-zip and Notepad++ installer. Those are the only two applications. In a real corporate environment, I would also be installing Malwarebytes ThreatDown, or whatever they're calling it now. But since this is a demo VM, I'm not going to load that right now. I may load it later just to show it off a little bit because I do like it. But for now, that's all I need. And then I'll just go to my ISOs folder. And yeah, that's actually a perfect name right there. And I'll hit build. And Windows sounds will still not go away. I genuinely don't know how to stop it. It always turns them back on after a while. Okay, perfect. So that's completed. Thankfully, you guys didn't have to hear that because I had it turned off. But there we go. So now, and since we've already installed .NET 3, we can actually remove that disk and just load our DVD drive, virtual DVD there. And just run Nanite, and it'll run perfectly fine, even though Internet Explorer and Edge aren't present. It doesn't need that to download and install applications. And perfect. Now we have Notepad++. All right. Last thing that I like to do, we'll disconnect any media we had attached to the operating system. And we are going to go ahead and reboot it one final time to make sure that it is fully good to go. And now that we have completed that, we're going to go back in here into the network settings, take away that defined server here, and we're going to select the generalize option, enter system out of box experience, and hit shut down. This process generally doesn't take too long on solid state drives, but I do know it can take some time on hard drives. At this point, you do not want to interact with the VM at all. You just kind of want to allow the system to complete the process. This process doesn't take all that long. Now, one other note I am going to make. Depending on who you ask, there's kind of a disagreement on what to do. If that fails, my policy has always been to start over from scratch. I know it takes longer, but the last thing you want to do is put an image on your network that's corrupted. So, there you go. I don't ever try to fix them. If it breaks it, I do it again and try to figure out what I did wrong. Now that that's complete, we can close this. We are going to actually delete it now because we don't ever want to power that base image on again. And we're actually going to go out here to, let's see, where have I got it? VMs, VHDs. Let's pin that here. All right, so now you'll see our virtual hard disk is 13 gigabytes. Now, if we were to repeat that set of processes for every single VM we had to create, we'd have hundreds of gigabytes of disk space taken up in no time. So instead, what we're going to do is I like to rename mine to base, and then we're going to create a child VM. And the way we're going to do that is by new hard disk, or a child hard disk technically, VHDX, differencing. And then I like to keep my names identical other than changing the ending. So here, whoopsies, here I will call it child. And then it wants to know where the parent is. This is the parent disk. And finish. And you only have to do that once because then what you can do is you can copy this child and make as many servers or whatever you want to do here as you want. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.